Okay, so today we start chapter 3 with just a real nice and easy introduction to the idea of standard form of a linear equation. And standard form of a linear equation is always in this format. It always has to look just like this: ax plus by equals c. And so we'll talk about the parts of the equation and what they represent. We'll talk about some rules for the equation so that we always have it in the correct format, because if you mix things up a little bit, then it's no longer in standard form and it doesn't quite work the same way. So we'll just talk about some of those things today and get some practice with getting things into the proper form so that they're in standard form. All right. So if we know that standard form of an equation is ax plus by equals c, then we should be able to identify all the parts of an equation that's written in that form, right? So in this equation, 3x plus 2y equals c, what is a?
3.
A equals 3, correct? B equals 2, and c equals 7. Perfect. All right, that one's pretty easy. How about this one here? 11x minus 3y equals negative 4. So what is a?
11.
A is 11.
Negative 3.
B is negative 3. Good. Check the minus sign. And C is negative 4. So pay attention to those minus signs, negative signs, and we've got to make sure that we identify the parts properly. What about this one?
A is 1.
A is 1. I like it. It is in standard form.
B is 0.
Oh, how did we get rid of that y? Okay.
Dividing by b.
0.
We multiplied by 0. If b is 0, then the y goes away, doesn't it? So b is 0, and then c is negative 7. All right, good thinking there, guys. Okay, a is x because there's a 1 in front of that x, even though you don't see it. B is 0, okay? So things can look like this. We can still call it standard form. We just have to understand where the parts went that are missing, right? Okay. Let's move on here. Okay, so sometimes equations are not written in standard form, but we want them to be in standard form so that we can use standard form correctly. So 4y plus 3x equals 9. What's wrong with this one? Okay, it's supposed to be x first and then y. So all we have to do is flip these two around. And that's okay since it's addition, it's commutative. We can change that, right? So 3x plus 4y equals 9. So now it's in standard form. Same equation, all the same parts. We just put them in the right order. Okay, how about this guy right here? 2y equals negative 3x plus 7. Yep, got to get the x and the y on the same side, right? So we need to put a 3x over here. So add 3x to both sides. Make sure you write it in the proper form. So it's 3x plus 2y, right? Equals 7. Okay, this guy here?
Wait, no, it ain't.
It's got to look like this, doesn't it? Ax plus by
But it's flipped.
equals
It
c.
still has the same values.
Okay, we've just got to we've got to make it look like this one. So what do I need to write first? 7x has to come first. Then what? Minus 2y, and it equals 10. So we didn't have to do any adding or subtracting, moving things around. We just had to get it in the right order. Okay. What about this guy? 2x equals 3y.
Subtract 3.
Subtract 3y. We got to get x and y on the same side. So subtract 3y. 2x minus 3y equals
Nothing.
0. Okay, we'll talk more about that in just a second, Aiden. That's great. I'm okay that you said c there. We'll talk about why it needs to be 0 in just a second. Because 3y minus 3y is 0, right? Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right, so you're going to have some equations. You've got to get them into standard form. So you just rearrange things as necessary using the things you know about equations. All right, let's talk about 3 rules for standard form. Number 1, c is a constant. So when you have this form, ax plus by equals, sorry, I hit the wrong button, equals c, whatever is in the place where this C is at, it has to be a constant. What is a constant?
No.
A number without any variable attached to it, okay? A constant is a number by itself with no variable. And so a second ago when you said, when we talked about that last equation where we said 3x, 2x minus 3y, we hadn't talked about this yet, so I don't blame you for saying C, but now that we know this rule, C has to be a constant. It can't be a letter, it's gotta be a number, okay? So if there's nothing else to put there, we put a 0. All right, so if we have an equation like this, I'm only allowed a constant in one place. C is the only thing that can be a constant in this equation.
Add 7.
So we've got to get this 7 away from the x and the y. We've got to add 7 to both sides. Okay, so 3x plus 2y equals 29. Now C is my only constant. It's in the right place. That's in standard form. We're good. All right. I'm only allowed a constant where C is at. I can't have anything else with C as the constant, so I've got to get rid of this x. Add 2x to both sides. So 3x plus 9y equals 13. Okay. All right, so rule number 1, C is a constant. You've got to have that constant by itself. You can't have anything with it. All right, rule number 2. A has to be a number greater than or equal to 0. Okay, we can be missing the x value. If a is 0, then the x goes away, right? But if there is a number with the x, it has to be greater than 0. What does that mean?
Can't be a negative.
Can't be a negative. That's exactly what that means. A cannot be negative. A has to be a positive number. And so this one's okay. This one meets that definition, right? It's got a number with it, and the number is bigger than 0. So we're good on this one. This one's in standard form. But what about this one? This is a negative 11x. Divide or multiply both sides by -1, okay? So if we multiply this side by -1, or if you prefer, you can divide it. I usually do multiply. That works better in my brain. Now we just distribute a -1 on this side, so -1 times -11x is positive 11x. A -1 times a plus 9y becomes minus 9y, and that equals -13. Okay, so now we've met rule number 2. Rule number 2 is that this has to be a number greater than 0. So 11 is positive and we're good, okay? All right, so rule number 3. So you'll have to do this with some equations. I'm going to give you equations that violate these rules and you're going to have to fix them, okay? Rule number 3, A, B, and C, those 3 numbers together have to have a greatest common factor of 1. Okay, does that make sense? Do you guys understand what greatest common factor is?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so they can't be divided by any common number except for 1. So when you look at 7x plus 14y equals 21, what's a common factor of all those numbers? 7. So what I need to do is I need to divide everything in this equation by 7. And that's a legal move. If we divide everything in the equation by the same number, we can do that. Okay, so what's 7x divided by 7? It's just x. And then what? It's plus 2y equals 3, okay? And this really simplifies the equation. The trick here is that, or the thing here is, if we graphed both of these equations, these are the same line. We just made this equation a whole lot easier to work with by doing this, okay? Harley?
So, are we allowed to do the divide by 7 on most equations where we're like trying to evaluate it, and then the answer that we evaluate just multiply by 7?
Actually, if you divide everything in the equation by the same number and that works, I mean, you can do that. You don't even have to multiply your final answer by 7. Your final answer will be the same. Because you've done the same thing to both sides of the equation. As long as you do the same thing to everything in the equation, then it won't affect your answer. So yeah, you can always simplify an equation by removing common factors from it. That's something we're going to be doing a lot later on. We're talking about simplifying equations that way. So, All right, so common factor with this, 11x plus 11y equals 44. So divide by 11, everything gets divided by 11. Okay, so 11x over 11 is x plus
Wow.
y equals 4. Awesome, good job. All right, what now it gets a little different. What is the common factor? Common factor is 3, but there's another rule being violated here. Okay, we've got to get rid of this negative 9. We can't have a negative x value here, so we've got to divide by negative 3. Gets a little trickier here as we move along. So divide by negative 3. That makes this a positive, positive 3x, right? Minus y equals positive 6. Excellent, good job. All right. Oh, we've got some work to do here. 12x plus 8 equals negative 14y minus 10. Let's do something else first.
Yeah,
Let's get it into the proper, let's get everything into the proper place first to see if our factors stay the same. Okay, so we need to
minus 8.
subtract 8. And we need to get the y over here where the x is at so we can add 14y at the same time, right? So plus 14y. So this is going to be 12x plus 14y equals negative 18. Okay, now what can we do with the factors? Now we can divide by 2 and we're going to be in good shape. Okay, so divide everything by 2. 12x divided by 2 becomes 6x plus 14 divided by 2 is 7y equals negative 9. All right, good job. Harley.
Is it possible for b to be an irrational number?
Yes, it is. You could have pi times y or something like that, I suppose, if you wanted to graph that. Yep. Tessa.
Do we have to like divide everything to this if only like A and B have a common factor, or A and C, or does it have to be all three of them?
It needs to be all three of them because let's say it was 4x plus 8y equals 7. Okay, then A and B have a common factor, but they don't share that factor with C. And so if you divide them, then you turn this into a fraction, which actually makes life harder instead of easier. The reason we want to divide and get down to the lowest terms that we can is so that it makes the equation easier to work with.
So you want to try to keep C a whole number?
C is going to be a fraction sometimes. There's nothing you can do about it, but yeah, it's don't make it a fraction unless you need to. All right. Last thing that we're going to talk about is this. Any equation that can be written in standard form is a linear equation. We already talked about what that means a minute ago. It would form a straight line if we graphed it, right? But not all equations are linear. Some equations create curved lines. Some of them create, different shapes, those kind of things, circles or whatever even, with an equation. But we want to kind of perform this test on an equation to see if it's a linear equation. So we can determine if it's in a linear equation if we can put it in standard form. So if it's already in standard form or if we can put it in standard form, it's linear. If we can't put it in standard form, it's not linear. Okay? So let's check these equations. Y equals 4 minus 3x. Add 3x to both sides. So 3x plus y equals 4. All right, do we have standard form?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a linear equation. I think on your worksheet I'm going to tell you to circle the linear equations. So that is a linear equation because we put it in standard form. All right, so 6x minus xy equals 3.
No,
Okay,
you can't do it. You can't divide by y or x.
we can't get the x terms together. Okay, if we can't put the x terms together into one term, then we're not going to have a linear equation.
Plus it's a negative x.
Yes, and this one would be a negative x too, which we don't want to have. So So this is not a linear equation. It's not broken. We don't need to fix it. It just isn't going to form a straight line if we graph it, and that's okay. All right. How about this? 1/3 y equals 1.
Yes.
Okay. What do we need to do?
Zero.
Okay. The x doesn't equal 0. What number equals 0? A equals 0. And so we have a 0x plus 1/3 y equals 1, and that's already in standard form then, right? Because we can have a equal to 0. That's good. All right, how about this? Y equals x squared minus 4.
No, because
Add-
two x's.
Yeah, add 4 and
Two
subtract
X.
y.
Okay,
Add 4 and subtract y.
add 4 and subtract y. Yeah,
Can x have an exponent?
oh, that's a good question. Can x have an exponent?
That's
It
two
can,
X's.
I mean, it's a legal move for it to have one, but is it in standard form if x has an exponent?
No.
No.
Okay, does it look like this?
Has to be.
In this standard form of equation, x does not have an exponent.
So would you have to divide by x to get it wrong?
Then you would have a different equation. You wouldn't have the same equation if you would end up with x,
Yeah.
x minus y over x equals negative 4 over x,
You'd have to
or
get
4 over x.
if you do it.
So you still would not have a linear equation because you've got too many x's going on. You can't get c by itself as a constant, and you can't get rid of this x in this term. Okay, so you could divide by x to make this to not have an exponent, but that messes up everything. That does not simplify your life, let me tell you that.
Exactly.
Okay, so just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, and it doesn't help you if you do it. Okay, so this is not a linear equation. I forgot to circle this one. This one is a linear equation. This one is not a linear equation. Okay, anytime you see an exponent, not a linear equation. Okay, unless it's with your, if you had an exponent with your constant, that doesn't change anything because that's still a constant. But if you see an exponent on your variables, there's not a linear equation. All right, so you've got a worksheet today. You're going to go through all the stuff that we just talked about in this lesson, get things into standard form. You're going to identify the parts of standard form and make sure that all the rules are being met.